The Mad Empress who heard voices in the walls. What happened in her locked room? Let me tell you the story of an empress, one who ruled not with decrees or armies, but with whispers, shadows, and silence. Her name was Empress Altheria of Alsangria, a forgotten kingdom nestled between frost-covered mountains and deep pine forests. She was once beloved, intelligent, poetic, and gentle. But in the final years of her reign, Altheria became something else entirely. She refused to leave her chambers, which were sealed from within by massive oak doors reinforced with brass locks and bolts. No one, not her handmaidens, her council, nor even her husband, was allowed to enter. The only way she communicated was through a slot in the door, where trays of food were exchanged for strange, crumpled notes filled with warnings, drawings, and riddles. And then came the voices. Altheria told her guards she heard voices coming from inside the walls. Not hallucinations, she insisted, but real whispers from unseen mouths. She claimed they were not human. They spoke in languages no scholar could identify. They told her things, ancient truths, secrets about the palace, about them, the people around her. She wrote once, "The walls breathe. They listen. They know what you've done." At first, it was dismissed as grief. Her infant son had died in his crib the previous winter, under circumstances no physician could explain. Then, her midwife vanished. Then, her court astrologer slit his own throat in front of the entire court. After screaming, "She is not alone in there." Within months, the palace changed. The guards were rotated constantly because none would stay stationed near her room for more than a few nights. They heard tapping, soft weeping, sometimes giggling, and sometimes a knock from inside the walls. One night, the Empress stopped returning her trays. The room was silent for 3 days. Finally, her husband, Emperor Vashin, ordered the door broken down. What they found inside was not what they expected. The bed was untouched, the curtains torn, the fireplace burned cold, and the walls were carved. Every inch of her chamber walls had been etched with symbols, hundreds, thousands of them, in patterns that didn't match any known language or culture. It was as if she'd spent weeks or months with a blade in hand, scratching these sigils into the plaster, into the stone, into the wood. There was no sign of Altheria, no body, no blood, only a final message, etched into the wall above her vanity mirror. It read, "They finally opened the wall for me." And beneath that message was a hole, about the size of a small door, freshly broken through the stone. It led nowhere, just empty space, bricks on the other side, as if the hole was made from the inside. They searched for weeks. They tore apart the palace, brick by brick. They sealed off the wing entirely. And in the centuries that followed, the locked room remained untouched, until it was reopened by a modern historian, who, according to the records, disappeared just days later. And his last journal entry? "The voices are still here. She never left. And now they've started whispering to me. They say no one should disturb what history chose to bury." But in the spring of 1987, Dr. Eliot Rourke, a reclusive historian and symbologist for Prague, did exactly that. He was fascinated with the Valsangrian dynasty, particularly Empress Altheria, whom he believed was not mad, but misunderstood. Her scribbled warnings, her obsessive carvings, her isolation, he suspected they pointed to an ancient form of communication, a pattern, a cipher. Dr. Rourke petitioned the government of the modern Valsangrian Republic, a small, now democratic region in northern Europe, for access to the east wing of Halbrecht Palace, the sealed-off ruin where the Empress had vanished centuries before. After 2 years of paperwork and international academic pressure, he was granted a single week of access. The room had not been opened in over 300 years. When the doors were finally unsealed, historians and engineers expected rot, collapse, and perhaps animal infestations. But what they found instead was far more disturbing. The room was perfectly preserved. Dust had settled on the furniture, yes, but the air was unnaturally dry, almost embalmed. The fireplace remained stone cold. The hole in the wall, the same one mentioned in the royal ledger, was still there, still bricked up on the other side. And those symbols, they were everywhere. more vivid than old stonework should have been, as though someone had carved them yesterday. Dr. Rourke documented every inch. But things changed on the third night. The two interns accompanying him, students from a university in Vienna, left the palace unexpectedly in the middle of the night. According to the night guards, they walked out barefoot, without jackets, into the rain. When stopped at the gate, they simply said, "The Whispers told us to go before she chooses one of us." Dr. Rourke dismissed it as a prank. He continued alone. He spent his fourth night sleeping inside the Empress's chamber. That's when the dreams began. He later wrote in his journal, "I dreamed of walls breathing, of thousands of eyes, watching me from inside the stone. They told me things, not with words, but with shape, with rhythm. They don't speak in language. They speak in presence, in pressure, in pattern. I finally understand what she meant. The symbols that bled." The fifth morning, Dr. Rourke made a terrifying discovery. The carvings, those strange, looping sigils etched by the Empress, were changing. He had taken rubbings on his second day, photographs on the third. By the fifth morning, some of the symbols had shifted. Some had vanished entirely, others were now inverted or warped. And on the wall closest to the bricked hole, a new one had appeared. A spiral, one that pulsed faintly under the camera flash, as if wet. He placed his hand on it. He said he felt a heartbeat. Then, the power to the east wing cut out. For 6 full hours. In the footage recovered later from an old backup generator's camera, Dr. Rourke can be seen talking to the wall. But there's no sound. His lips moved, his hands gestured. He wept. He laughed. He knelt. And then he began carving into his own arm. Not violently, but precisely, carefully, as if following instructions. Spiral after spiral, identical to the ones on the walls. When the guards finally returned with generators and light, Dr. Rourke was found unconscious, collapsed in the center of the room. Carved into the floor beneath him were these words: "She never left. She is the wall, and she is still listening." Where did Empress Altheria go? No human body could survive hidden in a single room for 3 centuries. That's what every scientist, every skeptic, every historian said. But Dr. Rourke had a different theory. He believed Altheria had discovered something beneath the palace, something predating the Volsangrian kingdom entirely. The palace was built atop ancient ruins, perhaps not human ones, perhaps not of this world. In his final journal entry, found tucked inside a book of rune lore, Dr. Rourke wrote, "Altheria's mind did not break. It opened. The voices in the walls were not hallucinations. They were intrusions. She was being recruited, not haunted. She didn't disappear into madness. She was invited in." And his last words, scrawled in a shaky hand, "I think I've been invited too." The room is sealed again. Today, the east wing of Halbrecht Palace is once again sealed shut. No historian has been allowed entry since 1987. Visitors report strange sensations near the wing, cold drafts, pressure in the ears, and an eerie sense of being watched, even in total silence. But the most chilling part? One tourist claimed that while posing for a photo near the locked east wing, they heard a sound, just faintly, a voice, from within the walls. It said, "Please let me out. I've learned the rest of the language." But the voice was not a woman's. It was a man's voice, rasping, dry and broken. The Mad Empress who heard voices in the walls. What happened in her locked room? The last days of Empress Altheria. They called her the Porcelain Empress when she was young. Altheria of Volsangria, born to a dying queen, raised beneath candelabers and cathedral ceilings, was once a symbol of divine gentleness. Her skin was pale as marble, her eyes like ink and snow. She spoke rarely, but when she did, her words were said to hush even storms. But by the time she was 29, they began calling her something else. Something darker. Mad. Not the sort of madness that rages or screams. No, hers was quieter, colder. A soft and insidious unraveling. She locked herself in her private chambers and refused to emerge for months. Her guards left meals, and sometimes found them untouched. When she did respond, it was with notes written backward, upside down, or in strange looping glyphs no one could read. A court translator claimed the symbols were based on an extinct form of Etruscan, but with a twist that made it non-human. She stopped addressing anyone by name. Instead, she referred to people as the copies or the hollowers. No one knew what it meant, except maybe her. The east wing of Halbrecht Palace had always been peculiar. It was colder than the rest of the castle, even in summer. Servants reported odd noises, scratches behind the wood panels, whispers near the tapestries, faint weeping that never seemed to stop. But only when Empress Altheria moved her bedchamber to that cursed wing did the real horror begin. She claimed she was closer to them in that room. Who were they? She never said. She spoke of stone-buried voices, of walls that breathed, of languages made from pressure and silence. Her final public appearance, months before she vanished, was during the Festival of the Lantern Sky. She stood on the palace balcony, looked up at the glowing lanterns floating over the city, and whispered, "We are not alone in the walls. They were here before our bones were born." Then she turned and fled back into the east wing. She was never seen again. Scene cut. Storm ambience. Crackling fireplace dying down. A week after she sealed herself inside, the crying began. Not hers, but something else. Guard station near the east wing reported hearing a baby crying softly behind the walls. When they opened the chamber, they found no child. Only the cradle Altheria had kept for her stillborn son. It was rocking on its own. The lead physician, Dr. Gerhard Balvin, tried to intervene. He ordered the locks removed. The door opened. But Altheria had sealed it from within. Iron rods, wax seals, and mirror shards were nailed across the door frame from the inside, as if keeping something out or keeping herself in. 2 days later, Dr. Balvin jumped from the bell tower. His suicide note was just 2 words. "She's listening." Build suspenseful music. Low, vibrating strings. Whispers begin faintly beneath narration. By royal decree, no one was to disturb the Empress. A daily ritual was established. Food was slid through a small panel. Notes were retrieved from a second one. Most were unreadable. Others contained lines like, "They knock to the rhythm of my heartbeat now. The bricks are wet with memory. Don't whisper in this hallway. They're always thirsty." The emperor grew desperate. He sent priests, scholars, even alchemists. One by one, they either returned shaken or never returned at all. A court astrologer named Velmarin spent exactly 20 minutes inside the hallway before sprinting out, drenched in sweat. When asked what he saw, he whispered, "She's opened a door. Not in the wall. In herself." He slit his throat an hour later. His blood painted the phrase. Not a queen, a key. Scene transition. Silent pause. Then soft knocking begins faintly. And then, one winter night, all sounds from the east wing stopped. No notes, no movement, no voice. The emperor, now half mad himself, ordered the doors broken. The chamber beyond had not decayed. It was perfectly intact, but the bed was unmade, the fireplace cold, the mirrors shattered, and the walls were covered in carvings. Etchings like veins, symbols and spirals, jagged sigils, an alien geometry that defied all order. At the center of the largest wall, behind the shattered vanity, was a hole, punched cleanly through stone, about the size of a doorway. But it didn't lead into another room. It led into solid brick, as though the hole had been made from the other side. Above it, scratched in with a rusted blade. They opened the wall for me. There was no sign of the Empress. No blood, no hair, not even a fingernail. Only a soft echo from somewhere deep inside the walls. Something breathing, closing tone, unsettling silence, followed by a whisper. Halbrecht Palace sealed the east wing the next day, and for centuries it stayed that way, silent, undisturbed, until someone opened it again. To be continued in Part 2. The historian who slept in the Mad Empress's room. Coming next in this chilling tale of whispers, madness, and the thing that lives behind the walls. The historian who slept in the Mad Empress's room. Voiceover horror script, full narration style. Centuries passed. The story of Empress Altheria faded from textbooks and royal archives. Her name became a cautionary tale, a footnote to a kingdom long since dissolved. Historians reduced her to a mentally ill widow, grieving a dead child and swallowed by loneliness. Until one man said, "What if she wasn't mad?" That man was Dr. Eliot Rourke, a reclusive historian from Prague who specialized in dead languages, archaic architecture, and forbidden religious sections. A man who did not believe in coincidence or insanity without cause. When he first came across the scattered fragments of Altheria's final letters, he noticed something others had missed. They weren't just ramblings. They were codes, geometric repetitions, syntax patterns from no known language. But more disturbingly, they matched symbols found in ancient ruins across the world, from Mesopotamian burial sites to a forgotten Arctic monastery buried in ice. Sites with no cultural link to Valsangria, and yet, the carvings were nearly identical. That's when he became obsessed. In 1987, Rourke arrived at the newly formed Valsangrian Republic, armed with permits, university backing, and a sealed request. He wanted access to the east wing of Halbrecht Palace. The wing had been locked since 1693. No modern foot had entered it since the day Empress Altheria vanished. At first, the government denied him. But when Rourke revealed the centuries-old carvings he'd matched to the Empress's room, along with funding from international universities and private occult collectors, they reluctantly allowed him entry. He was granted 7 days, with 2 student assistants, a film crew, and a translator. By day 2, both students left the site without explanation. They simply walked away, barefoot, into a snowstorm. One left a note in her bedroll. She speaks through the walls. She wants him, not us. Dr. Rourke stayed, alone. He slept inside the Empress's chamber on the 3rd night. That was the night the symbols changed. He'd photographed every inch of the carvings upon arrival. But the next morning, he noticed something was wrong. One of the spirals had moved. Not weathered, not broken, shifted, as though the stone had softened and reformed. As if the wall itself had decided to rearrange its own language. Then he noticed something else. New symbols were appearing. One in particular, a tight double spiral, shaped like a seed, pulsed slightly when photographed. It didn't show on the camera, but when he viewed the footage later, it blinked. Once, slowly. He placed his hand over it. He said it was warm. He said it had a heartbeat. From Rourke's journal, day 4. They are not dead, not even sleeping. They are just waiting for the language to return. Altheria gave them words. I think I've given them grammar. They are trying to speak to me now, not with sound, but with arrangement. And on day 5, last night, I had a dream of teeth in the stone, of a woman walking inside the wall, humming. She called me by name, though I had not told it to her. She said, "You're next." On the 6th day, the palace power went out. Security footage recovered later from a low-res emergency camera shows Dr. Rourke talking to the wall. Calm at first, then animated. Then, he begins carving. Not the wall. Himself. Symbols. Slowly. Repeating. Carefully. Matching the ones on the bricks. One on each forearm. One across the chest. The spiral on his neck. No screaming. No hesitation. As if following instructions. When the guards returned at sunrise, they found him collapsed on the floor, surrounded by markings scratched into the wood with his nails. One line circled again and again. She is not inside the wall. She is the wall. Dr. Rourke survived, but never recovered. He was committed to a private asylum in Zurich, where he stopped speaking entirely. The only words he ever wrote again were these. I am hollow now. She used my language to finish her sentence. And beneath those words, crudely drawn in red pen, the spiral, the east wing was resealed. No one has entered since. But those who work in the palace say sometimes, late at night, the lights flicker in that corridor. Sometimes they hear a knock. Sometimes they hear a woman humming. But most terrifying of all, sometimes it isn't a woman's voice anymore.